Bonjour à tous. Merci en tout cas d'être venus pour cette table ronde. Cette table ronde va se tenir en anglais, je vous préviens, parce que nous avons le plaisir d'avoir un locuteur anglophone et donc nous allons avoir cette conversation en anglais. Après, si d'aventure vous aviez des questions à poser, on pourrait éventuellement tout à fait vous les traduire avec les limites. Évidemment, n'ayant pas recours à l'intelligence artificielle, ça sera une intelligence humaine qui pourra éventuellement contribuer à cette traduction. L'idée de cette session, comme vous connaissez les règles, enfin les règles ou en tout cas les habitudes aux assises, c'est que nous allons avoir nos intervenants avec lesquels nous allons discuter, débattre. Et évidemment, si vous avez des questions, remarques, commentaires, compléments que vous estimez utiles, vous êtes les bienvenus. Le format de cette salle, sa taille et nos effectifs vont permettre que vous puissiez interagir de manière assez ouverte. Et donc, en tout cas, n'hésitez pas à le faire afin que nous ayons de cette discussion le partage le plus enrichissant possible. Je vais présenter donc nos différents contributeurs et nous allons ensuite débuter cette conversation, cet échange, afin qu'on puisse couvrir autant que possible le sujet, dès lors évidemment qu'il est vaste et que le temps est contraint. Donc on demande par avance l'indulgence du jury que vous représentez en quelque sorte sur le fait que nous n'épuiserons vraisemblablement pas toutes les facettes de cette thématique. Vous l'avez, cap 2030 vers l'autonomie stratégique d'une Europe cyber-résilience. Il y a à la fois un échéancier qui peut paraître lointain et une thématique large. C'est précisément les différentes dimensions que vont couvrir nos intervenants. Je les présente en termes d'ordre non protocolaire. Donc mon voisin à ma droite, Christian Michael Tracci, who is a strategy officer at the European Cybersecurity Organization, EXO, which is an organization's real European organizations dedicated to cybersecurity to gather all the community involved in the cyber industry to deal with the European authorities and eventually with governments and to try to have to deal with that subject on a collective basis, to do it as a European team on that field of cybersecurity. On his right, we have the pleasure to welcome Pedro Verdelho, who is chairman of the Cybercrime Convention Committee at the Council of Europe, who is a magistrate as a prosecutor in his country, Portugal, and who is in charge in the Council of Europe of this Cybercrime Convention Committee. You remember that the Council of Europe was the first international organization which dealt with cybercrime, because with that Convention of Budapest, the initiative of having for the first time, a text which is not regional like it is in the European Union, but beyond the European Union, with all the member states of the Council of Europe, to have one text dealing with the question of cybercrime, dedicated to child pornography at the beginning, but now which is larger than this specific domain. And on the last left of the panel, Guillaume Contat, who is CISO of the French National Assembly, and then who has to deal with question of legislation, obviously, but as an institution who is concerned by the subject of the resiliency. So thank you, gentlemen, for this, for coming to that session. The idea of this title, which is very large. The idea is, once you receive, then maybe every one of you, by one word or in few words, explain, when you are dealing with that notion of resiliency, how do you cope with that subject? How would you consider, and in your activity, coming from your point of view, what's the notion of resiliency means to you? Maybe you can start, if you please. Thank you.
I can introduce. Okay, thank you for being here, everyone. So, resiliency, well, it's a quite concerning matter. So, because we have to take this subject on the governance side and the technical side, and we need to be sure that we have the correct rules inside that can offer the opportunity to apply, technically. And so, resiliency is by essence, one of the major concern you should have when you are building an IT system and services you are delivering to clients or users.
Also, thank you for being in this panel. We were discussing before the nature of this panel is quite broad. Maybe in other panels you went there to learn things. I'm not sure if you will learn, at least from my side, any concrete thing. But anyway, I think the value of this panel is to discuss general ideas, not current, not vulgarity, but general, quite strong ideas. And that's why I think it's important to discuss resilience. For me, like an European, resilience should be keep our values, keep walking on the direction we have in Europe for centuries. We have indeed very old, but very strong, very mature, very discussed, strong values in Europe, such as respect for the life of the other, such as a number of other strong human rights, such as respect of the rule of the law. And this is very remarkable in cybersecurity. That is a topic of the conference. For example, in a country like North Korea, I will not comment the values, but in a country like North Korea, should be quite easy to keep cybersecurity. But I'm not sure they have the same notion of us regarding human rights, regarding rule of the law, for example. So for me, resilience is still keeping our values in a quite different world. The Europe we have, because this is an European discussion, the Europe we have these days is a mix of different cultures. It has been always like that. Since the origin, we have here a mix of different cultures from different parts, including of the world, not only of the Mediterranean, but also including different parts of the world. But we have quite structural values still with us. I mentioned them. And maybe the role of Europe these days is to keep like it is, and also helping other geographies to learn about these interests. We need to be clear. Europe, that in the history had a strong role in the world, for example, regarding population, is like 6-7% of the world. In the past, we could say Europe was rich, quite rich, comparing the other countries. It's not the case nowadays. A number of other geographies are richer and have also a lot of political power and influence in Europe. What we have is our values and also the legal structure, but I'll come to that later.
Thank you. And seeing from the industry, the point of view, how do you consider that notion of resiliency?
I would characterize it with two keywords and two pillars, if you will. One, I would say, is the traditional security angle. I'm a CISO, I've got a threat, how do I stop it? And that comes with all the security controls, operational, technical, some human aspects, and all the things that we've been talking about for a couple decades by now. But then I think we need to start linking this concept of resiliency today in Europe, in our context, to the market and political dimension. One pillar without the other doesn't work anymore, because I could have the best solution that stops the threat that I'm facing as a CISO, and then one day that solution doesn't work anymore because the license was cut out. So how do we also ensure that the market dimension is strong enough that ultimately supports and ensures resiliency as a whole in Europe in cybersecurity? So technical and market dimension.
There's a dimension you didn't mention, is that European Union especially tackled the issue of cybersecurity through regulation. And the question is that, do you consider this is a useful approach? Because obviously once you are the CISO of the French Parliament or as a public prosecutor, obviously you have a full respect for the law and regulation. But do you consider that this approach of regulating to get that level of security and resiliency is the best, or is the good way to do?
Love the question, because we spend a lot of time on this at EXO, doing a lot of analysis on European policies. And we always say that we should really start looking at this question from a different angle. It's not yes or no, is regulation good or bad, but what regulation? How are we regulating? And maybe we can start looking back, understand where these regulations are coming from. You've got the threat landscape, you've got a number of threats, number of vulnerabilities in all the products that we've been using in our companies, and the situation was not good. As simple as that, and that was the trigger that some policymakers at European or national level picked up on and started regulating on. And we ended up with some of the policies that we got today. Some we really like, some we don't like. We are trying to improve them, but I think that it becomes a much more useful conversation when we start talking about which regulations are useful and which are not useful, which are just causing compliance burdens and which are actually improving security. So shifting that conversation to the how, I think is way more useful, and I'm very happy to go into the details on that.
According to your experience and point of view, do you share this view?
You know, I'm getting old, and so I still remember the principle of the Roman law saying, most of you are not lawyers probably, so I'll try to avoid legal expressions, but anyway, Roman said, it's a legal expression, ubi ius, ibi societas, meaning in English, where you have laws, you have a society. I would say the opposite, meaning to have a proper society, you need to working with respect to the others, you need to have a law. So it's good to have any kind of regulation in any kind of issues, including on cybersecurity. If you have a regulation, you may agree, you may not agree, you may agree partly, you may say this is improvable. But if you have a regulation, you know what's your guidance. You have a road book to behave yourself. And I would say it's good to have a number of regulations in place within the European Union. Maybe we can discuss it, we can improve it. I will not enter in details, I will not give you my opinion on certain details, on aspects. But, for example, the DSA is a good regulation. We have now also coming the MiCA, the regulation on crypto assets. Mm-hmm. It's better to have it than not to have it. The same with DSA. For a long time, we have the data protection framework, which is an essential part of the European laws nowadays. And so it's better to have than not to have. Another point on this kind of issues and regulations at the European level. I said before that one of the good assets of the European culture, which is no longer European, it's spread in a number of parts of the world, is the principles. And I also said that Europe is now smaller than in the past, so it's coming close to the geographic size of our continent. But still, we have principles, strong and very mature principles. And the regulations within the European Union have a very curious and interesting side effect. For example, the GDPR, the data protection regulation, it's European. So it applies just within the European Union, not even outside the European Union in the rest of Europe. As you might know, the European Union counts 24/7, but in Europe we have 48 states. 46 out of them are members of the Council of Europe, but only 27 are members of the European Union. And in fact, the regulation on data protection just covers the European Union, meaning 27. Nevertheless, the same type of framework covers also the rest of the countries in Europe by the means of the Council of Europe that shares with the European Union the culture on data protection, except to two of them, Belarus and Russia. So this regulation on data protection, even if European, in fact, covers much more states around the world, because a number of states around the world looked at it and said, this is a good idea. This is a good framework. And just for mentioning some countries that included in their laws data protection rules, different countries such as Argentina, Cabo Verde, a small country in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in Africa, Australia, Japan, Senegal, Mauritius Islands, and try to cover different countries in the world that are not at all European countries, but included the GDPR. And this is a task of us in Europe. So when you speak of resilience, when you speak of the future, when you speak of having a kind of digital fortress in Europe, we need to think also in these sides. And now, the MiCA, I mentioned it, it's better to have it than not to have it, even if you don't agree with it. The artificial intelligence regulation is better to have it than not to have it. Again, I'm not sure if those last, the MiCA and the artificial intelligence, will have the same kind of receptivity in other countries of the world. Maybe they have, maybe they don't have. We don't know. It's too early to speak about that. But at least we have in laws, in regulations, in directives, principles that are important for us. And we keep them because we want to be in the future respectful to each other, respectful to human rights and to the rule of law.
Guillaume, what do you want to...
Wow. Impressive. Okay. I'm not at all going to comment what you said was huge. Okay, I'm on much more maybe practical side. Yeah.
Which is useful.
I think this is the reason why I'm here, if I've understood well. So for me, regulation, of course, representing values and defending all this, but me on the practical side, it's a way to avoid chaos. It defines a direction, and it's like a guidebook with rules. And you don't have to be just stupidly reading the book, but understand the meaning of the rule. Why is there this rule? Because it's quite a challenge for who is a CISO in any institution or companies to fit 100% with the rule. So our role is to understand the rule, what is the meaning, try to translate it for the governance, for our authorities, which are signing our check for the money. And then we can buy the technology or the services or the intellectual resources to fulfill what is required by the rule. So this is my approach, and of course, without regulation, it will be like
So it means that you consider, and maybe you to have these sanctions in case if you don't fulfill all the criteria. It's legitimate to have in your legislation sanctions to be sure not to punish or to encourage the entities to be compliant.
Well, the sanction is always the full package with the rule. So otherwise, people are not going to try to read it fully and understand what is the meaning of the rule. So, but sanction is we can understand it if the sanction arrive. Why? Is it because the rule haven't been understood or didn't have enough resources? So the sanction is really after the end of the process. So I don't say it's not necessary. It have to exist. So it gives the full spectrum of a law. But if you arrive at the sanction, means you missed something in the middle. So, but it's necessary.
As public prosecutor, you have to admit that sanctions can be useful to convince, teach, and enforce regulations.
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course. We cannot believe in a ping-pong world, meaning there are laws, and there are ways to break them, and people sometimes break them. And so assumption is when you study at law school, you study that the law includes a description of something wrong and a punishment to those who commit that wrong thing. So that's a part of it. That's a part of the game. I believe we should respect principles. I said it, but I also believe humankind is not perfect. People are not perfect. So if they violate the law, of course, they need to be punished. That's the reason why we need law. Otherwise, we would believe in a heaven, in a paradise, without... even though I like John Lennon anyway, but I believe in poetry, in fact. But I don't think that kind of reasoning and poetry can someday be a practical thing. And that's why we also have criminal treaties, for example. You mentioned before the Budapest Convention, and I would like to refer to it now. The Budapest Convention is a good example of legal-born legal text, a treaty, supporting strongly human rights and data protection, covers now a good part of the world. The Budapest Convention, I said, is European-born because it was drafted within the Council of Europe. But anyway, since the first moment, also other countries discussed the draft, the origin of the Budapest Convention, such as Mexico, such as South Africa, such as Canada or the United States. And they are also parties to the convention. Anyway, I mentioned it because the Budapest Convention expanded, is no longer regional, as you mentioned before, and expanded to the rest of the world. And now around 90 countries of the world are parties or are in the process of becoming parties. This is half the countries of the United Nations. We'll have a treaty of the United Nations this month of October, by the end of the month, but it's not even close to the Budapest Convention regarding the strong safeguards it includes, regarding the effectiveness. And what is the common link between the 90, well, around it, countries that are members of the Budapest Convention? You just can become a member if you have a strong common standard of respect of the European standard on human rights, the European Declaration that is not far from the Global Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations. The point with now the United Nations is that we have the metrics from the late 40s, from like 70 years ago, and then we have evolutions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The point is that a number of countries did not sign the evolutions. You know, who are they?
A question about, on the title, we are talking about autonomy. The question of, we have, and in France especially, we have the question of digital sovereignty, which is a question strong in the debate, or even if in the name of some ministers, and we consider that's a subject. What's your opinion, and in that case of EXO, that's this notion of technological sovereignty is playing or not an effective role in strategic choices in the field of cybersecurity? Is that something concrete, real, or there's no flag on the cybersecurity industry?
All right, let's start from the context. Go back 2-3 decades ago, cyber used to be something completely different. I would argue. Not everybody agrees with me on this. It used to be a bunch of friends getting together and either breaking stuff or trying to fix it. Fast forward 3 decades later, it's become a political thing. In a good sense, in meaning that you've got a national parliament that is legislating on it, and we know it's important and whatnot, but it's also become politicized. It's used to achieve state objectives. So in this context, that's where kind of sovereignty comes in. And the concept is useful, but sometimes also thrown around without being realistic and concrete. Because let's break down the concept. Does it mean complete independence from any other actor? Probably not. Or even if that's what we mean, then it sounds completely unrealistic, right? So if we start talking about sovereignty as complete independence, that's just not going to happen. Let's be real about that. Then the second question is, what do we mean about it? Which are the critical dependencies that are essential and you want to be sovereign about, and which are the ones that you can just accept, right? And then the third interesting question for me is, at what level are we talking about? Because I come from Brussels, and European sovereignty is a big word these days, but we also know that traditionally sovereignty is a national concept, right? You've got national sovereignty, it's a national security matter, and it's realistically difficult sometimes to see how European sovereignty come about. So I think that the conversation is very useful to push us forward, to take some actions in the different directions that we mentioned. But I think at this point, it's very important also to be operational and to realize, okay, we're not gonna rebuild the full technological stack, and we're not gonna substitute a coding language just because it was not invented by a European, right? And the reason why I think this point is very important is that if we get stuck on this debate, which becomes easily politicized, we're not really moving the needle. And we need to invest the time and the resources we have on those critical services or components of the stack that will eventually guarantee that we are sovereign.
Once you are dealing with cybersecurity on behalf of a national assembly, how do you cope with that subject of digital sovereignty in that context?
I leave it to the political.
Thank you.
I'm a technical guy. Okay, so for me, European sovereignty, of course, I agree with the idea. Who doesn't is quite crazy, and you should change country and see the other one, how they are living. The fact is, you were talking about resiliency at the beginning. So this is my approach of it is I approach it by risk, and sovereignty, in fact, behind of it, it's like how do you defend the resiliency of your IT systems? And it's a long time ago we had some answer to that problem. So having many suppliers for the same services in case of someone is bought by another company and the service is cut down. So you need to approach the resiliency. So sovereignty is just like the political vision of it. And we are dealing, for those who are working in IT, with this subject since a long time ago. So for us, it's a classical risk we are used to manage with the software, the hardware, services, different suppliers, supply chain, and all this. So like I said, for me, sovereignty is a political understanding of this matter, the resiliency.
Obviously, how do you consider that subject?
I'm also not a politician. I cannot be. But, you know, I could just say, like in that kids movie from Disney, it's a small world after all. This is a small world after all. I already said lawyers are boring. I'm boring. I'm sorry for bothering you with histories. Everybody knows in the legal community that from years ago, in fact 3 centuries ago, we have a notion called the Westphalia Peace. It was a group of treaties, several treaties that put some stop on the wars on Europe on those days, like 16th or 17th century. I don't know. I know nothing about it. But anyway, the principle from those treaties was each country is independent. And so in the country is sovereign. For example, if in the country someone is convicted, The other country cannot say, this is not right, you should not do that, because it's in the independence, the sovereignty of that country. So we live with that from like 3 or 4 centuries, the notion. And suddenly, COVID came. And we realized during the COVID crisis that each state was not at all sovereign. For example, vaccines regarding it. For example, financial resources to fight the crisis. And one day, a good man, not a politician, or maybe it was, a good man, not with legal stuff, not with legal or political grounds, said, we are in the same boat. And this is just the opposite of the Westphalia Peace. This is not the same world as we had 4 centuries ago. Certainly some rules still apply. For example, any of you is a prosecutor in Monaco, I think it's obvious for all that you will not go to Nice gathering evidence because Nice is in another country. Why? Because this is an independent country and France is an independent country. So if you are a prosecutor in Monaco, you need to request assistance from Monaco to Paris, and then from Paris someone will send the request to Nice. That's how it works. This is the traditional way of sovereignty. In Europe, we already moved away from that model. Maybe you are familiar with the European arrest order. That is, if a prosecutor from Nice wants to arrest someone, not in Monaco, because Monaco is not European Union, but anyway, if a prosecutor from Nice wants to arrest someone in Lisbon, my city, just issues the order, and the police officer in Lisbon should arrest that person. So this is the other model, not the traditional one, is the other model. And in Europe, we have a number of moves on that direction, is the European integration. And maybe, if I was John Lennon, I could say, maybe one day we can move on that direction in other regions of the world, not just in the European Union, because that's the direction. We are, in fact, in the same boat for a number of reasons. And if we share values with other countries, we don't have any reason not to share also the boat. And on that day, let's imagine no frontiers, let's imagine, like John Lennon, no nations, no countries, and the rest of the things.
There's not only criminal law, but there are poetry as a public prosecutor. So this is as a source of inspiration. Christian, Michael...
quick reaction. So what you said, the distinction between the technical measures and the political measures, political vision is super interesting, right? Because coming from a traditional cybersecurity mindset, totally get it, right? I've got a threat, how do I stop it? But now the context has changed, right? What if your EDR tomorrow doesn't work anymore? First, or what if I don't have a EDR that I can trust? Maybe it works, but I don't know what rules are being pushed. So that's why I started off from the 2 pillars. There is the technical operational side and then the market political one that today plays a really big role, right? And when we start talking about sovereignty, you need both, and you need both to be really good. You need the European talent to be able to detect and stop and respond and whatnot, and also the strength of the political and economic system to do it in a concrete way, but you do need them.
Yeah, of course, I will choose, you said trust. Trust is essential. We are working in a field where trust is in our DNA. So you're all talking about technology, and we saw in the past an event like, I'm sorry for, it's not name and shame, it's just the past CrowdStrike event. And it's exactly this kind of situation. It was unplanned, and it's just a technical issue. What if it's a political consequence of a choice to annoy us or to impact Europe? Of course, we are taking this matter seriously. So in the technology we are choosing, we are trying to choose the less worse. I mean, the one that will have the less impact if the service is stopped. Can it continue to work without interference from the outside of the EU? But the market, I would love that all the technology of cybersecurity will be 100% French, created by French, and we will have a wonderful world. No, not at all. But I don't have the answer. I'm dealing with what I have, but we are always concerned. So it's like the residual risks we have.
Just a question, because you are representing the national level with the French National Assembly, and the fact that you are dealing with the European level on your respected functions. The idea is, how do you think we can, as we said, this date 2030, to see that in the future, how the cybersecurity will be distributed between that European level, national level? Is there any rule specific to anyone, or there is a European rule which has to be distributed, adapted on the national level, or some things will be dealt specifically and exclusively by the national level? Because it's something, as you said, Carl Michael, as you said, that it was, Christian Michael, that it was too important, and it has to be dealt with the national level.
Tough question. Why am I here? It's very complicated. I think it's a lawyer question. No, it's my way to avoid the risk. You see?
Nice shot.
I give it to someone else.
Nice,
This is my tactic.
absolutely, very nice.
No, in fact,
rugby, it would be a very good shot.
In fact, I believe it's not a legal question, it's a political question. In fact, but I don't avoid it. No. And why is it a political question? Because in the middle of the question is one reality, that is the integration principle of the European Union. So in its matrix, in its DNA, the European Union has a strong idea that is integrating each time more the regulation. So as respecting the differences between cultures, between languages, between legal systems, the idea of the European Union is to approach the laws from all the 27. Why to approach? First, because we share common interests, common principles, and then to make it easier to the market. That's the genesis of the idea, to make the market easier for everybody. And this is a good area where the European law has a lot of space to expand, meaning this should be a European initiative, because cybersecurity is so big, is so complex, so expensive, so difficult to handle, that it justifies an European level approach. It's not easy to discuss cybersecurity. It's not easy to fix rules on cybersecurity because it touches with a number of principles. Just think in one thing. For example, just an example, the anti-spam you have in your email box, the anti-spam as principle is just looking at all the emails you receive. Otherwise, it could not work. It touches with privacy, in fact. Maybe I should not have said that.
Well, I think the no.
You know. So this is sensitive. This is sensitive, and the rules around this kind of issues need to be discussed, need to be mature. And we have more capacity to do that at European level than at the national level. On the other side, not only because of the market, because the European market is a past. What we have now is an European environment these days. What we need is to have common rules at European level, with an European dimension. So as we can travel, we can make businesses, we can just be at the European level with common safety, knowing that we have the same rules all over. And so there's room for a European initiative, even if naturally there's still room for national sovereignty in some parts. And we have some areas of the sovereignty that are still reserved for the states and not for the European Union.
Considering your experience in group of interest of the European industry in cybersecurity, do you consider that most of the time legislation and regulations are stimulating or affecting innovation? That helps, or it's a difficulty for the industry?
I love the previous question. That was a very easy
one.
one.
Sorry.
I hate this one.
Maybe you can transfer it to your neighbor, as he did before.
No. I've got an answer, but I just hate when they ask it.
Sir.
Because again, the answer we're looking for is we like it or we don't like it. And to go back to where we started, I think the question should be, what do we like and what type of regulation are we talking about? Because to go back to your point, if we came up with a policy that just said we're going to have a unified market with less bureaucracy that facilitates efficiency and innovation and whatnot, that is still a policy. So to your question, I would argue we like that. But we are answering to your question looking at the outcome, right? Or at how that policy works. And if it were the opposite, if we're regulating just for the sake of regulating, I'm not the lawyer here, then I would say, no, we don't like that. Because, yes, it's true that law gives us clarity and it saves us from chaos and all those things. But what is the ultimate goal? Like in cybersecurity is to protect us from something. And if you want to talk more about sovereignty and whatnot, is to make sure that Europe can preserve the way we live and be competitive on the global stage, because those two things go together. So if I've got laws that just sets requirements for the sake of setting requirements and they're clear, I don't think that's the goal. But if it helps us be more competitive, be stronger, looking at the global stage where we are, right? You said 6% of the global share. Like, we need to be cognizant of this, right? So policies that support and preserves our way of living, yes, let's work on those.
So about my question about the fact that if legislation are stimulating innovation or make it more difficult, how do you consider, is that an help for the industry? You see that as a good friend or something which is make it more difficult?
Today?
Yeah, and in up to 2030 at the end, yeah.
Depends who you ask. I think today the pendulum would probably lean a little bit towards the no. There is, at least from the work we're doing, the inputs that we're collecting, private, public, and research, there is some discontent, to say the least, on the ecosystem that we built that is a little bit too focused on the compliance side. There are a bunch of requirements that are overlapping. There is not that clarity that we're talking about. So if we can work on that, great. Does it mean that we want to throw out everything and we just want to deregulate? No, because again, let's look back. Why do we have the system that we tried to build over the last decade? There are some serious needs, right? There are some threats. Our companies and organizations are losing a lot of money to external threats, and our products have a suboptimal level of quality. There are a lot of vulnerabilities all over, right? So that's why Europe has a tendency historically to address problems by legislating. So we came up with a bunch of legislation saying we got to fix this. Now, again, on the way we do it, there's certainly room for improvement. But on the needs, I think we're in the right direction.
Thank you. Isa, just to be sure, because the agenda is short and we are just few minutes. If you have any comments, questions, I don't want to no censorship on your. Well, no, fine. Yeah. yes, I will try. Oui.
Moi, j'aurais bien dit que, d'après vous, est-ce que le côté technique, par exemple, le fait qu'il y ait le GDPR, le RGPD et les sanctions maintenant avec la NIS 2, ça aide l'état de droit à avancer, la communauté du droit européen et le côté éthique à avancer, en fait, plus que le côté politique, parce qu'en fait, à chaque fois, on a opposé les deux. Et est-ce que ça ne serait pas un moteur? Et en 2030, le fait de réglementer de plus en plus de sanctions, on a une avancée. Ou alors vous pensez au contraire, vos interlocuteurs pensent au contraire, que tout on va plus faire de RGPD, on va plus avoir besoin de...
Alors, je ne veux pas augurer de leur réponse, mais il me semble que tout à l'heure, ils se sont réjouis en disant qu'il n'y avait pas de règles. Enfin, notre ami procureur nous a dit qu'il n'y avait pas de règles s'il n'y avait pas de sanctions. Mais je vais lui reposer la question et en principe, nous allons avoir notre confirmation, Inch'Allah. You understood the question, so that's fine. I'm great. You see, it's very efficient. The floor is yours.
Definitely, we need sanctions. So no rules with sanctions.
I love sanctions.
No. In a perfect world, I already said, like John Lennon, in a perfect world, we should live in
But that's what I...
love and peace, and a bit shark.
Yeah.
Anyway, we need definitely questions if we have rules. Absolutely. So this is the only way to make people respect the rules. Otherwise, it would not worth it. Why to respect rules that cost you money if you don't avoid the sanctions? So this is the short answer for that, I would say.
Yeah, you want to add something? No. Just maybe because we have just a last but difficult question. In the strategic autonomy, the question nationality, we have a debate in France about nationality of suppliers. Is that something which is a criteria according to your different point of view? The fact that we are asking about, okay, the nationality, or even if that's absolutely difficult to establish on technical and financial, legal terms, the nationality of a company by saying, okay, we are autonomous because we have national players, but how do we define that notion of being national, and is that a criteria, or we have to forget that kind of approach on the field?
You want my approach
and
on technical matter? Like I said, we are working in risk management, so the nationality, of course, like I said, I'm French, so I'm very, like every French, very proud to be French. So I'm defending the idea that if we have a supplier which is French versus any other nationality, of course I would choose the French one, but not because he's French, because he's better. And he brings less risks. So I will never choose just because he's French. It's nonsense. How am I going to build a safer IT system if I add risks just by the question of the nationality? So, but I do hope the supplier is French and the best. But it's a tough choice.
I feel like we are starting a new debate, but our time is limited. One question: do you produce bananas in France?
Yes, in Martinique.
Ah, Martinique,
oui,
c'est pas la France, hein?
C'est pas la France. La Martinique? Yes, it is.
Et du pétrole. Avez-vous du pétrole en France?
Du gaz. No, sorry. But
I think you got my point. That is, in this new world, you cannot be totally independent from other countries. I don't know. I never visit North Korea. But anyway, I don't know about them. In any case, I don't believe in that perspective. Sorry for saying that. I believe in the opposite perspective. I already said that one of the roles of Europe these days is to keep strong, defending our common interests and our common principles and human rights and the rule of the law. Regarding the rest, one of our tasks is also to convince others to believe in our ideas, because we believe on that. You know that African saying that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you really want to go far, bring your friends.
If I can add just a small stuff, because about the supplier we choose, or there is something very important. Each time it's the legal part. So I say I'm not legal, but I am always reading it. And of course, it's always easier with a French supplier because he accepts the rules. Sometimes we have to fight. I'm not going to do some name and shame, but French people are very famous for being hard on the legal. And I'm not a specialist, but I'm hard on the legal part. So because I need guarantee. Of course, there is a technical matter. But at the end, the very end, what counts is what is written in the contract and the risks we can see in it. So this is, like I said, it's not black and white. It's a gray area with different nuances.
Yeah.
So this is the hottest debate that we're going to have in Europe in the next year. The institutions are working on this. They're supposed to come up with a new proposal on how to deal with suppliers, how to assess the risk, and what level of access they can have to critical systems. That's one approach that then, though, presents some problems when you look at it at the European market level, right? Because if you only select your national champions, then we are still struggling with building those European champions, right? That are able to compete with the other markets. So it's a very, very big discussion that we're going to have on what are those security controls that we want to impose and level of trust and so on. In the literally next year is going to be the hottest debate under the Cybersecurity Act. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Christian Michael, to have opened that door for the next session of the Assises here in Monaco. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your contribution to that debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.